Teachers who've given up on a student, what did they do for you to not care anymore? And do you know how they turned out? He pushed a girl down a flight of stairs because she wouldn't go out with him. He thought everyone overreacted. She was an athlete prior to the incident. She had 4 spinal surgeries and will never regain full mobility and will always have some pain. He was completely unrepentant and felt completely justified because she had rejected his advances. He was an asshole. He was an asshole prior to this incident, but this was the event that pushed me over the edge from "you're a jerk, but I'm going to try and help you learn something" to "fuck you and fail." I didn't intentionally fail him. He was able to accomplish that with alarming ease all by himself. It was a college student. She had a lot promise, but was really lazy, I think. I explained plagiarism the first day of class. Covered it again before their first paper was due. A few people still submitted plagiarized works. You can tell it was mostly because they don't understand citing and it wasn't malicious. I review it again, and things are great. Other than this one girl. She submits a second assignment and it's worse than the first. She asks how I know. Well, it was obvious, because her writing was okay, but the plagiarized bits were great. So I googled those bits and easily find the originals. Third assignment, does it again. I have to escalate. I offered her one-on-one help. I reminded her prior. I pointed her to resources. I suggested she attend a writing clinic. She just kept trying to make the plagiarized bits sound more like her than somebody else. I had to fail her. She appealed. I submitted everything about the situation. She lost her appeal. There comes a point in every single year when I have to give up on a student or students. It's the 4th quarter and I have tried every single thing I can think of and more to inspire or help them, and they refuse. I have to let them go. I have to shift my focus on the other 130 plus kids who are still working. The thing is that I do care. Very much. I never stop caring. I carry those few failures around in my heart year after year. Long after I forget the names of the thousands of students I have succeeded with, I can tell you everything about the ones I lost. I have given up on one student, and it was when it began to impact on the learning of the rest of the class. This kid was a behavioral nightmare. I worked with the headmaster to get him anger management referrals, mental health evaluations, involved social services to see what was going on at home, etc. His family wasn't on board and accused me of just not being nice enough to him. Day after day he still continued to throw things at me, scream at me, pound his head against the floor, attack other class members, etc. It reached a point where I worked out that he ruined about 30 to 60 minutes of class time per day, and I had enough. I stopped trying different tactics with him and just had him removed every time he even looked like he was about to kick off. It was really frustrating because his schoolwork was well below average, and I knew it would stay that way unless he was able to remain in class and benefit from the teaching. It still bothers me that I wasn't able to reach him. I don't think he was a lost cause, but I don't really think any 9-year-old is a lost cause. I think it was just more than I could deal with at that time. As for how he turned out, I don't know. He switched schools the next year. It was his first and only year at my school, so I imagine he jumps around a lot. I care, but sometimes it isn't the best use of my time. I could neglect 149 students to provide that one student with all the tutoring and home contacts and extra help, and chances are she will still fail the class and get suspended for fighting because she doesn't yet want to get help and won't use it. Or I could give my best to all of my students, sadly accept that this student isn't yet interested in help, and try to let her know that when she wants it, I'll be available. At the beginning of the school year, I was told I was going to have an emotionally disabled child in my 5th grade class. The labeling of kids bothered me a lot, but this one really took the cake and he greatly upset me. As I got to know him, I found the problem to be anger due to a lack of structure and commitment from those around him. His dad abused his mom early in his life, then dad left not long after. He says he never remembers his dad being around. Since then, his mom worked constantly, trying to find a male figure to replace my student's father. Suffice to say, it was unsuccessful, which led my student to have severe trust issues. By the time he was in my class, his mom worked in a town 45 minutes away while he attended school locally, with no one else around. If he was sick, upset or all around having a bad day, he was stuck. Due to his mom's schedule, she didn't let him stay home sick. This led to incredible outbursts of anger on anyone who would cross his path, including me. This child would scream and degrade, but worst of all, he got physical. When it was with me, I'd do my best to de-escalate, but it often had no effect. This kid wasn't emotionally disabled. He was emotionally neglected. He'd physically escalate with other kids, but my breaking point was when he choked another student at recess. I caught him on top of a play structure with his hands around another student's neck. The other student was deep red from oxygen deprivation and fear. The kicker was that this kid was his only friend at school. Soon thereafter, I had a conference with the mom. Threatening expulsion was the only way to her in, and she explained to me that I wasn't doing enough to discipline the other kids to keep her son calm. I gave my resignation notice days later and left within a month. I don't know how he turned out. Thinking about it makes me sad, truthfully. I wish I would have done more some days. Then I realize I went far above and beyond what I should have. I'll let one of my own students get choked. It never should have gotten that far. All I know is that he's 15 now, and I hope that he's doing well. I went to a very conservative public high school in South Carolina, West Oak High School. I had a mohawk, wore metal/punk rock shirts and didn't fit it in. Starting in my 9th grade year, the school officials started calling me out of class and searching me for drugs. Happened like 3-4 times a week. They would call my parent and ask about animal mutation/cruelty, and that the other kids stated that I was sacrificing goats and other animals at my house. It even went as far as they put me in a special class helping mentally retarded kids for 2 years instead of having me take gym, as I was a distraction to other kids. The entire ordeal was ridiculous. I was introvert, stayed to myself, and never caused any distractions other than my out-of-town appearance. As in ripped jeans, long hair. It was the grunge Nirvana era and I fit the bill perfectly. An abused kid living in poverty with no one or nothing to turn to but music. So here I was, a 14-year-old kid whose father just died and forced to move back in with my drug addict mother 2 states away, went to high school every day for 3 years just to be harassed and ridiculed by teachers and students, all because I looked like a devil worshipper. I look back and realized how fucked up the situation was. I was constantly bullied, and anytime I fought back I was the one who got detention, suspended, while the bullies were let go with no repercussions. I was lonely, lost and a confused kid. I had no friends, no guidance and was extremely depressed. Even the teachers and counselors at the school shunned me like a witch in the Salem witch trials. I ended up dropping out at the start of 11th grade because of the harassment and almost instantly got my JED and completed a college degree in less than 2 years. 15 years later and today I'm a programmer and live a pretty decent life, a nice family, mortgage and the whole American dream thing. Not sure how this really fits into the discussion, but I know as a kid I wish teachers hadn't given up on me. I was just a kid from a poverty-stricken home, and my entire high school experience left me completely fucked up. To this day I still have social interaction issues that stem from my time at West Oak High School. I had an excellent student who was recently killed in a hit and run about a year after the class. This understandably upset me. As I was walking around campus on other business I was contemplating why it always seems to happen to the good ones, and I was concluding that maybe it's just because we remember the good ones better and take notice when bad things happen. But at that moment I was cutting through the student union building and saw another student from that section. One of the slackers who I wrote off and had failed, who had barely attended class, and who had submitted garbage work. She was playing guitar in front of an audience, and she was amazing. What I learned at that moment is that we don't see everything about our students in the keyhole view of their lives that we get in the classroom. I did my job by failing her, and I'd fail that kind of work again, and I have. But to write her off was wrong, because our students are people too, and they have their own lives and interests. They have their own good days and bad days. We don't always see them at their best. So aside from horror stories like some of the violence narrated in this thread, I try to not write people off anymore. I can accept that maybe I don't have too much to offer to someone, because positive influence is not something that can be forced. I also accept that sometimes the best thing for students can be to fail them and to let them see the consequences of their inaction. But that's not the same thing as giving up on them. I'm a swimming instructor. I've given up on a few kids. Usually because they don't listen to me or other teachers, or just can't seem to do basic things like kick faster. Most of them eventually figure it out after a few weeks, so when that happens I can focus more time into developing proper technique instead of just letting them swim up and down the small lane. But there is this one boy I teach who has a mental disability. He can do one thing at a time, like kick from point A to B just holding his breath. But as soon as I try and get him to do two things at once, not happening. Like for instance, when I'm showing him how to breathe he'll kick for a little bit, stop kicking, lift his head up, put his head back in, and struggle the rest to the end. If I try to correct him, it's often met with harsh resistance. There are 3 other children in this class, so some weeks I just have to give up on trying to teach him anything, and just focus on developing technique for the other kids. I gave up on a student after the following. He failed the first quarter, badly. I offered him a re-evaluation of his grade. He and his mother signed a contract agreeing to the terms. Turn in all missed work from Q1, attend extra help regularly, maintain a passing grade for Q2, no lateness or unexcused absences in Q2, that sort of thing. He fulfilled exactly 0 of the requirements. He's not a bad kid, but the effort I was putting into his interests was wasted. I have too many other students who need my attention to waste time on someone like that. I believe in second chances. I even believe in third chances. But at some point, if you're inclined to shoot yourself in the foot, then I'm inclined to let you. Student here. Just wanted to say I think there are far more teachers who have taught for too long and end up giving up before they even begin. I believe there comes a point where teachers should just stop. When they become permanently mean people and have lost their passion for teaching. I had a teacher once in college. It was the first day of class, and although I had ordered all of my books ahead of time, in order to have them for the first day, there was one book that I had not received. The reason for this was that the warehouse of the company I had ordered the book from had gotten flooded from Hurricane Sandy. I had an email that they had sent me saying that they found the copy of the book elsewhere, and they were delivering it to me, and it would arrive in 3 days. So, I went to class. Teacher asked me why I did not have the book. I explained. These were her exact words: as a person I feel bad for you, but as a teacher I do not care and you need to get out of my classroom, so I left. Next class, same thing. Third class I had my book. Then at the end of the week I realized that she had failed me for each day I was not in class. I could tell this class was not going well, and as I was on academic scholarship I could literally not afford to ruin my GPA by being in her class. So I went to her office to drop the class, and I told her why. Her response: "Are you always going to be a quitter?" Because it sickens me, I couldn't help it. I had to ask her if she was always going to be a bitch. She OBV didn't like that, and refused to sign the paper until after the withdrawal period had passed, which would result in a big fat F on my transcript, bringing down my GPA, and would cause me to have to leave my university. But I appealed it and won. Just goes to show how sometimes some teachers are just horrible and should know when to stop. I taught college, so I don't know if it applies as well. I gave up on a lot of students in my time, a whole lot, probably more than not, honestly. I taught third graphics, which was a credit for game design, so there was a lot of misconceptions of I play games, therefore I make games. Generally, if a student stopped showing up, I gave up on them. That goes without saying. I had a mental 3-strike system. There were a few things that got you strikes. Trying to outsmart the instructor for a free good grade. Shit like turning in empty files hoping I don't actually grade shit. Turning in past projects, or straight up cheating. The good old fashioned I was in class, you must not have seen me, when attendance comes into play. State college. Can't pass if you miss too much school. Fucking around in class, and complaining about my teaching skills. Your shit face was on Facebook during the lecture. I warned you it was important. You then went right back to Facebook. You're lost a quid. Lack of motivation. This is a lot less obvious, but you can really tell when a student is trying, being motivated and improving. It really shows when a student never practices or tries new things. Sounds terrible, but I won't spend time on you if you won't spend time on the class. I have never pawned off a student for the next teacher to deal with, mainly because I was the next teacher. Pass or fail, I get them again. I had very strong morals with grading. Those got me in a bit of hot water, because apparently you are supposed to give a student a C, just so we can fluff up our graduation numbers. I said fuck that and quit teaching. Last thing I need is a dude who can't optimize a sphere trying to use topo tools to optimize a sculpt. I taught freshman English classes for a few years. The student that comes to mind was incredibly bright and had a real penchant for writing. He was also a bit apathetic and didn't turn in all of his work on time, but was still smarter than several of the kids in that class. He showed up to class irregularly and often would cite very personal reasons for missing class, usually involving his girlfriend breaking up with him. I remember once sitting him down and having a very in-depth conversation about his life, including his mental health issues. The thing that really struck me was how he was surprised I even gave a shit about him or his life. For me, I just saw a troubled kid who had a lot of potential. When he left class I truly believed he'd turn it around and make up his missed work and show up every day. He showed up a couple more times and didn't come back. I sometimes regret not reaching out to him again, but I had other students to worry about and I already felt like I'd done enough at the time. I do wonder about him sometimes and what he's up to. Worked for the first time as a learning support assistant at a high school last year, and one of the first kids I worked was a year 7 kid and his whole attitude was just so horrible. He was such a control freak and simply would not compromise for anything. He was incredibly rude to me, and since this was my first job in a school, almost every lesson with him was a horrible experience. Plus he also hit his girlfriend, though I'm not sure why. In the end I just gave up, which was a shame, because he was a smart kid. The other assistants had similar issues with him, and they kinda gave up too. One actually said, if he were her son, she would have strangled him at birth, and she had a lot more experience working with difficult kids.